Buonasera a tutti, good evening and welcome to the Italian Radio Hour. Io sono Viviana and I would like to welcome back any regular listeners and also welcome any new listeners. Also be sure to like us on Instagram and Facebook at the Italian Radio Hour and subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch up on any past video interviews. Vorrei dare il benvenuto ai nostri ascoltatori da tutto il mondo, grazie per essere con noi anche oggi, mentre continuiamo il nostro viaggio per l'Italia e la cultura italiana. In today's conversation, we'll have two guests. We'll have writer, producer, and director Pietro Ferraro, who will be talking about his latest production, Il Messaggero, a full-length documentary that features a very interesting, touching, and very personal story of a man who we'll find out later who this man is, from a small village in Calabria, and his mission to bring messages of hope and joy to the United States as an immigrant in 1966. Along with Pete, we'll have also Luca Stanzo, the chief of the fire department of Sharpsburg, who somehow is related to this beautiful adventure that we will be covering today. But before bringing Pete and Lou to the program, a little pubblicità. Parli italiano? Do you want to learn, improve, or master your Italian? Istituto Mondo Italiano can help. Located in the heart of Regent Square, Mondo Italiano offers small group classes and one-on-one private tutoring to help you learn Italian in no time. Visit us online at www.istitutomondoitaliano.org. Un caffè, per favore. My first cup of coffee sets the tone for my entire day, and I get my coffee at La Prima Espresso. La Prima has been brewing Pittsburgh's best coffee for nearly 35 years. Try any of their in-house roasted varieties of beans from all over the world at home, or come and enjoy an espresso or a cappuccino at any of their locations, where their friendly baristas and familiar faces will make you feel at home. Because a trip to La Prima is like a little trip to Italy, only closer to home. Well, Pete and Lou, benvenuti, welcome to the program. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good, thank you.
So we're talking about a trip to Italy, and this journey comes with great emotional attachment from all the people involved. So I kind of cut it short because I didn't want to spoil all the fun right off the bat. Pete, I wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking a little bit also about your wonderful career. You are a 10-time Emmy Award winning, writer, producer, and director, and then you are first-generation American whose parents immigrated from Italy. So you've been in the television and marketing industry for quite some time, correct?
Yes, over 3 decades. Yep.
And how did your career start? Was it something that somehow you got influenced by first-hand experience when you were a little child, that affinity for media, or is it something that you kind of developed on your own?
No, actually, that was a very good guess, Viviana. My father always tinkered with, film, 8mm film, Super 8 film, and then later with VHS and video. And I picked up a lot of that along the way. He was very good about documenting our family and documenting everything that was going on around him. Lou can even attest to that, because he would always walk around the firehouse with a video camera, I guess, on certain occasions. He used to shoot video of fires, in fact, floods and all kinds of events, and then lend the footage to local television stations to use in their newscasts. So growing up around that, I caught a little of that bug, and I even started using some of his early film equipment to make videos with my friends and my cousin and things like that. So and I just immediately after doing so for a little while, began enjoying the storytelling. I didn't really know it was storytelling at the time. I was just having fun with some friends and some film. But that's he used to use cameras like this, little 8mm film cameras. This isn't the one he used. I actually have it in another room, but this is something similar to what he used. And so I would take it and buy some 8mm film and shoot some music videos and things like that. So yes, I was influenced by my father.
Lou, can you tell me a little bit where your family is from and whether you were born in Italy and you came here at a young age, or your parents immigrated from Italy and you were born here in the US?
I was born in Calabria, San Pietro, and I came here when I was 8 years old.
Okay, so you probably had some recollections of your
Yes.
the relatives that you got to meet growing up there. And when your family decided to move to the area, was it kind of a Sharpsburg?
Yes.
Right away. So it's really your home, and a lot of visits from relatives from Italy over the years.
Yes. Mostly my dad's side is everyone that is here, except for one aunt. But my mom's side, my mom is the only one here. And every one of her sisters has been here. And she has 5 sisters and a brother, and they've all been here.
So we have not really dove into the full connection between Pete, Lou, and many other inhabitant of San Pietro. In Rome, we have the San Pietrini, but that's a cobblestone. So I don't know if I can say San Pietrini for the inhabitants. And that moved to the area of Sharpsburg. And this is thanks to maybe what it started as just wanted to bring messages from relatives that were in Italy to the ones in the US, and then eventually transformed into much more than that. The title of the documentary that Peter has completed on the life of his father, so that's the mystery that we were keeping, Il Messaggero, is indeed very, very touching. I have to be honest, I did shed a couple of tears in quite a few instances. But let's talk a little bit before we go into the conversation. I think I have the trailer that people can enjoy because I think it frames a little bit the personality of your father and how well respected he was in the community. He was really a highly respected, well loved, a love that he felt for everyone else. He was a good man. So let's give it a try.
This is my dad, Pietro Ferraro. Like many Italian immigrants, he brought family traditions, such as winemaking, to the United States from the Calabria region of Italy. That's not all he brought with him. In 1966,
let's see if in 1966, what happened, Pete? I think, oh, here we go. For some reason.
Yeah, I was lagging a little bit.
Pietro embarked on a mission to do something unique and previously unheard of, something he would share with Italian immigrants in the US. Like millions before them, when my father, mother, and older brother left Italy, they left behind loved ones, friends, and acquaintances. But Pietro had an idea. He would reunite dozens of Italians with their relatives already living in the States, not in person, but in a way that none had ever experienced before.
Okay, so the way that these messages were, well, I guess these messages are still traveling from Italy to the United States.
Francesco, sì, cugino Agostino, hai ricevuto l'altra vostra, l'avete ricevuto la mia voi? Voi state buoni, beh, noi non c'è male.
Peppe, mia moglie Agostino, io mi posso abitare tuo vicino.
Anne, figlio mamma. Io mi avete, prego sempre per voi.
E te l'ha preso, vedi?
This is the story of one man's simple but selfless act,
Pete had a great idea what he did.
an undertaking to help bridge a vast divide, filling a void by delivering personal messages of love, happiness, and sometimes sorrow, and how more than 50 years later, his gift continues to touch the lives of Italian Americans.
Il Messaggero. Il Messaggero was indeed a man that was all about relationships. Can you tell us a little bit, growing up, Pete, how that love for the others, and I think there was also a nice, cute story about the purchase of a soccer ball in Florence that you share to show us right away the character of your father.
My dad was very outgoing. He had a great personality, great sense of humor, and just was naturally gregarious. People just cling to him. You know, he made them laugh. He made them feel good. He made them always feel important, no matter what he was doing. He also loved to help people, so he would fix their houses, everyone that needed something done, he was happy to do it. I think his only regret sometimes was not getting to the projects fast enough, because he had a laundry list of people that he wanted to help, but and when he did need help himself, there was always this back and forth with the paisan, in the area. So if they needed or if he needed something done, they would help him, and then he'd give him some homemade wine. He'd give him a supersad, whatever it was, to show his appreciation. But the soccer ball, I mean, that was actually my Uncle Freddie, and when my father was the oldest, so he had already started a life in Florence, Italy, moved away from Calabria, got married, had a child. But even before then, he would come back to his hometown and visit with the family. And my Uncle Fred has always been a big soccer fan. It still is today. And they didn't have a lot of money back then, but my dad was working and did what he could and purchased a soccer ball for him, and then brought it to him. And he played with that forever. And that's something that my uncle just mentions in the film, and that's one of the things that he always remembers. Just the outgoing and giving type of person that Pietro was, and would always try to do something for somebody that he knew would make them happy. So for my uncle, it was soccer. He loved the game. He bought him a soccer ball, and my uncle goes on to say how he even slept with it all the time. So that's the kind of person he was.
And can you frame a little bit the time that your father was growing up? What was historically happening in Italy? And what were the living conditions in the town he is from?
Well, San Pietro in Guarano is a little village near Cosenza, up on the top of a mountain. It's a beautiful, beautiful little town. It dates back to the medieval ages, so it's old. There's a lot of old buildings and things like that. So you can imagine it was kind of a very humble upbringing. They always tell stories about how they had a little farm, little piece of land, on the outskirts of town, and they would have some chickens, maybe a goat, and that's rabbits they would raise, and of course they would later on use them to feed the family. So it was very, very humble beginnings, and that's the type of just the environment that everybody lived in back then. He was born in 1934, and it wasn't too long. That was during the fascist era of Italy. And Mussolini was in charge and wreaking havoc on the world, with Hitler, which of course would later become World War II. and my mom tells a story about growing up in San Pietro when the air raids began happening, and they would go into the mountains and hide in the mountains, so they wouldn't get bombed, because of course they bombed, they would just carpet bomb the towns and villages. So San Pietro, to my knowledge, didn't get bombed, but Cosenza definitely did. People died, people got hurt. There was even a like a concentration camp there for a little while, and outside of Cosenza, where they kept Italians, when the Nazis began, feuding with the Italians.
Yes, and Lou, obviously you're, quite a few years after, but do you remember maybe your parents or some of the stories your family might have shared about what it was like during those years and how that might have impacted your growing up? I know that with my parents, it was always, you don't leave anything in the plate. That one of the practical things is like, you don't know, in times of war, that was kind of always so are there any stories or memories
Just
that
my
you
mom,
heard?
my mom mentioning how hard it was for them. There were 6 kids, and just a part of the life that they had.
And,
That was mostly it.
probably also very confined, because in those times families were more numerous than the families today, and the dwellings were much more Spartan than in size and everything. You had you said before, Pete, distant relatives in the US, and also that cousins. Now we have the Italian Americans now fighting in. They don't want to have a war. They don't want to, be in battle against the Italians. So what happens to the post-war? Is that part of the migration that eventually brought your father to the US?
Yeah, so there were 2 really big waves of immigrants from Europe and Italy, of course, at the early part of the century, and then this wave after World War II, and that's part of what my family came over pretty late. 1966 was pretty late for comparatively to a lot of Italians. That's why I'm first generation American, having been born here. I was born a year later after their arrival, so just missed being born in beautiful Italy. But my older brother was born in Italy, and myself and my younger brother were born here. But in 1965, there's the Congress passes the Hart-Celler Act, and it changes the immigration process, and it makes it easier for those that have family already in America to come over. So it changes the process and makes it easy for them, and within a year they're here in America. So before, it was based on job skills and things like that, but because my father's entire immediate family had already emigrated, his younger brothers and sisters and his mom and dad, they were able to make that connection and allow him and my mother and my brother to come over to the US.
Mm-hmm. Among the skilled professions that you had mentioned, what were maybe the popular ones, or maybe the ones that your family engaged in?
Well, my father worked in the textile industry in Italy, and he fixed the machines. He didn't have much of a formal education. He taught himself everything. He moved to Florence at the age of 13 to get a job and start working, because it was, as I mentioned earlier, difficult, as you can imagine, having his parents having to feed an entire family. He wanted to go out on his own. So he built a house out there in Florence with his uncle. He lived with his aunt and uncle. And so, I think that and just working in the textile industry, fixing machines, he taught himself to be a mechanic. And then he came to the U.S. and brought those skills with him. He worked at a paper factory in Blawnox, Pennsylvania, fixing machines, and he was very good at it. And they would, when a machine broke at their plant in New York, they would send them to New York, because they didn't have anyone skilled enough. This is all without a formal education, so he was always fixing things, and that's what he did. But some of his friends were, chefs. Some of them were bricklayers, very successful. The ones that came over when they were younger were able to get a, more formal education, and go on to do things, where it wasn't manual labor, and it wasn't, you didn't have to have a physical skill set. You could utilize, your intellect, so to speak, and do things like that. And of course, the next generation, even more so, and so they laid the foundation for generations to come. And I think as Italian Americans, we're all very, very grateful for that.
Kind of the same question for you, Lou. As far as your family transitioning to the US, I actually have two questions for you. One is maybe what industry or profession they got into once they were in the US. And also, you came here that you were already 8 years old, so you already spoke Italian, and you had to start from scratch. You had to create now a brand new identity, new language. How was that process? So maybe first, what your family got involved in business-wise, and also your own personal journey.
My father, like Pete said, he was a bricklayer. He was in construction. Once he came here, he stayed in that field.
Okay.
And as jobs would dry up back in the 60s, they would just move from job to job. He ended up in a steel mill in Blawnox, very close to here, and he stayed there until he retired. And my mom also went to work. She worked with Pete's dad at the same paper factory. She stayed there till the place closed, and she retired from there.
Wonderful. And so how was your transition? 8 years old, were you impressed by the idea of moving to America, or so excited about the journey, or scared, or maybe both?
I can still, it was scared. I can really still remember that. But once, we arrived here, I had to go to school. I was in 4th grade there, and they put me in 4th grade here. And then from there, it just, you fit right in, and everything worked out great.
Yes. And it's also amazing how children adapt very easily, starting from the language and everything. For the adults, it might take a couple extra
Yes.
steps. And Pete, did your family, did they speak any English, or again, had to start from scratch?
No, they did not speak a word of English. And it was difficult because my mom and father were both 32 when they came to America. So that's pretty late to learn a language. They were taught, especially my father took, English classes, or back then they called it Americanization classes. In the evenings. He would work in the day, in the evenings. He had a cousin here in America, Peter Marsico, who's lives in Aspinwall, Pennsylvania, and he taught English classes to all the immigrants, including my father and some of his friends. And so it was more difficult for my mother because she was home with little children and couldn't take those classes and had to take care of the household. But my father took those classes, which enabled him to learn the language enough to function and work in society, of course, and converse with friends and family and that, everything you need to do once you learn a language. But the interesting thing though is Pete Marsico actually taught history and Italian, European studies, sociology, and Italian language at the high school that I attended, and the same high school a lot of my friends attended. So he taught us Italian, but he taught my father many years prior English. So it was kind of this, full circle. It was very interesting, and how we grew up in that sense. And I had to really, know my formal Italian, because if I didn't, my parents would get a phone call at night and tell, he would tell on me that I hadn't done very well on the Italian test that week, So, but he's a great man and wonderful person, and he did so much for the Italian community in the whole region, and for their children like myself. So.
Actually, the situation that you talk about, your mom having to focus on the family and the home first before being able to engage in ESL classes and so forth. We are in the 21st century, and that, the new professionals moving, because they don't use the word immigrant anymore. Now we are professionals moving overseas. Anyway, no matter what the fancy designation is, often happens that, one of the two spouses is the one that gets transferred, and the other one is the one that has to adjust to, and probably has less. It has more tasks to take care of, for the well-being of the family, and probably the least amount of time to devote to their own integration into the fabrics, because again, there are to-do lists for the children and for the house. So I came here to the United States in 1993. Probably somewhere in my older wallets, I have a calling card. And making a phone call, it was still an ordeal and quite expensive. I would dare to say that maybe in the 60s, that was even more complicated. Same question to both of you, to describe if you had access to a telephone, whether it was in the house, whether it was a common phone. Another thing that I remember, but when I was still living in Italy, that at times, you would pick up the phone and the same line could be someone else's. So as a kid, then we would, instead of hanging up, entertain ourselves listening to other people's conversations. But anyway, did I just admit that? Anyway, so back in the 60s, what was the contact, access to technology and frequency of those phone conversations? Lou, maybe you want to tell us about your family first.
Sure. What I can remember, no one really had phones. The only phone in town was in the local bar. And my grandma lived right next to the bar. So when my aunts and uncles would call, they would send a letter first and to tell you, hey, I'm going to be calling on the date and the time. And you were there. And then they picked up. My aunt just recently passed away, and she told me that story. She moved here when she was 17, and when she got a letter from my grandpa that, he would be calling her. That's exactly, you had to go to a local bar to get your telephone calls.
Yes, those were the appointments you wouldn't want to miss. And for you, Pete, what was the access to telephone, and how frequent were the conversation back with the relatives in Italy?
Yeah, it's from, my understanding from what my parents have told me, and what friends have told me, same situation as Lou's family. It was very rare, very, very rare to have a phone. And if you did, phone calls were extremely expensive. So, families would call each other maybe once or twice a year, Easter and Christmas. And yeah, Christmas is a big one. And really that was it. And the phones themselves, sort of a communal area, a place, a restaurant, a bar or something like that. There might be a phone, or somebody who was very well off, they might have one in their home, but it was very, very rare to, in the 60s to make phone calls like overseas like that.
Yes, or maybe the paper thin letters that would be traveling at wherever pace mail was traveling at that time. Now let's move the conversation to Pietro and his love for electronics, because this is, as you said before, he would document everything and anything. If he lived during today's age of Instagram and YouTube and so forth, he'll probably be an influencer. He would be
yeah, right.
racking up likes one after another. So tell us a little bit about some of the things that you remember him documenting, whether you wanted to be in front of the camera or not.
Yeah, well, like I said, he always had a camera of some sort with him, either a video camera or prior to that, it was a film camera. So in the documentary, I tell a little story about how I was playing baseball for the Sharpsburg Little League Association, and I was up at bat, and I took a couple of pitches, and then all of a sudden they stopped the game. The umpire came out from behind me and walked up to halfway up first base and started pointing to the guy in right field and was yelling at him, and saying, "You get off the field." And the guy wouldn't move. I guess he didn't hear. He was just filming with his little 8mm film camera. And the guy yells, the referee yells louder, "Sir, get off the field." And then the gentleman heard it, and he puts his camera down, and he walks over to the first base line. He never really left the field, but he got out of the way. But anyhow, that was my dad. And he wanted to document everything, and he wanted the best view and the best position that he could get, even if that meant getting on the field, which you're not supposed to do, obviously. But that's how intense he was with his love, of his hobby.
Lou, were you ever a part of any of these films? Did you get documented film? And
Yes, I was. For Memorial Day, we always have a pretty large Memorial Day parade. He would be out with his camera before the parade, during the parade, and after. And after a parade, all the participants would come to the fire hall. Everybody would eat, and he'd walk up and down the aisles with that camera. And everybody had to say hi and say something to him. He was recording it for the future.
So my question for you, Pete, how much material has he collected over the years? Where was he storing it? And because then, we're not talking about digital that you can upload somewhere. We're talking about the physical films.
Yeah.
So rolls and rolls of films. Right.
It was all physical media back then. And he had a little homemade studio in his basement, it was pretty impressive, actually. It was all consumer, products for the most part, but and he had just libraries and shelves of all these videotapes, and film, too. So, and he would actually splice film and edit film, which, if you know anything about film, it's a skill that's usually taught in film school, but he taught himself to do it. And so he would take all these little film reels that were like 3 minutes each, and then he would splice them together according to the theme. So if it was birthdays, it would be all of, my brother Franco's birthdays, from a young child to his teenage years, and he'd splice them together, and then you'd have a 18-minute reel of just all of his birthdays. And he did the same for myself and my younger brother, and Christmases, did the same thing. And he would have them on a shelf, and the audio tapes were something that he told me about many years ago. And I always just thought it would, be a great idea to make a film based on what he did. And so that was something, obviously, I had the opportunity to do, and use the actual audio tapes that he had recorded.
So let's get into, from filming now, Il Messaggero is more about audio messages. So how did the initiative start, and where? and what was his intent. And I think I'm trying to see if I can find also a picture of the recorder he would use. So did he purchase? Was he gifted to him, or
Yeah.
does the company still exist? I think it was a Manacor.
Yeah, I don't know. He purchased it when he was in Italy, because so what they, in lieu of phone calls, as we talked about earlier, it's very difficult to make, difficult and expensive to make phone calls back to the United States. He and his family began recording these audio messages, and a couple times a year they would send them to they would send them to each other, and so that became the basis for what he later created, this mission to record people over in Italy and bring the messages to the United States. But yeah, it was a machine that he had purchased, saved up to buy. They weren't, it was not really big on the consumer market. Hollywood, was using reel-to-reel tape, of course, and recording artists were doing it, but it was not something that every household had. But again, he was always very much into electronic recording devices, and that was really, I think, one of the first ones he ever had.
There is one line, the opening of one of the messages, "Carissimo figlio," and I think that's from Francesco, Pietro's father. While he was transitioned to the American way of life. And the way that those two words are said, they contain, the message could have stopped there. It just, the beauty of these messages is that they're kind of a snapshot of those emotions that people were feeling, the language as well, because dialect also has evolved from what it was 50, 60, 100 years ago. But some formality as well, even if people were talking to their children, there was a way, like I remember my mom addressing her in-laws with the boy pronoun. That was never, they were never called by first name. So sometimes you might still perceive some of that. So I guess this idea caught up quite fast. I mean, probably a lot of people, when messages were to be delivered to them, would gather all together, and almost like people used to do around the radio, right?
Exactly. Yeah, they would, he began by just going to relatives first, and then going to close friends, and then a little further on the outside of the circle. But when you listen to some of those, you can see, obviously, it's almost like it's a very festive atmosphere. So people would find out that he was coming to record messages, and then they would want their loved ones to hear from them, and so he would record them. He's not going to turn anyone away. And there were people on there that, my mother, who's still alive today, and she was very well aware of the whole mission that my father went on, and she could not even identify some of these people. I mean, she didn't know who they were. They were neighbors, in the neighborhood. And so but they would get together. It could be a small family of a few people. It could be a dozen people there at one time trying to record these messages.
So yes, it is a way that you can capture the culture and the values of those years. So I know that we're probably fast forwarding to your idea of capturing now all this wealth of messages, information, and history, pretty much, to create your project, and the reactions, also capturing the reactions of the people that now, thanks to technology, you were able to digitalize these recordings. And I actually like very much also in the documentary when you interview the person that has helped you with this major enterprise. Can you tell us a little bit about, I don't recall his name right now, it'll come to me in a second, how you went about finding the resource that would help you with this project.
Sure. Yeah. Andrew is a colleague of mine. Yeah, Andrew Epic. He works in audio. That's his area of expertise for a local in Baltimore, because I live in Maryland, and he works for a post house is what we call them, where they're editing audio, all types of audio, whether it be commercials, film, podcasts, just everything like that. But one of the things he does, and which he doesn't do much of anymore, because it's just there aren't that many reel-to-reel tapes anymore that people want transferred, but he would transfer audio tapes for the government, for the National Archives. He transferred NASA recording audio tapes from when they landed on the moon, on some of the missions. So through my contacts and through working with him for many years, with all the marketing and the creative services that I do for my job, I approached him with that, and he got the tapes. He went through a process that was pretty in depth because they are so old. The tapes were, they're over almost 60 years old now. He had to restore them first so they wouldn't fall apart when he put them on the reel-to-reel machine, and he had to bake them in a little oven, and so once he baked them, all the materials would stick together so they wouldn't fall off, and then he could take that and digitize it, and then from there he would take it into a program called Pro Tools and tweak everything that he needed to do. He would call me and say, does this sound like your father? Because does this sound right? Because the pitch would be a little different. I'm like, he sounds a little too Mickey Mouse-ish, maybe bring down the pitch a little bit, and slow it down. And so we played with it back and forth a little bit until we got it to sound as close as possible. But yeah, that was quite a process for him to do. And again, I'm very appreciative of his talent and skills that we were able to do that.
So then there is the part, you are turning to a messenger yourself, because now you are getting hold of the people whose relatives have been recorded, that have left messages and so forth. So you knock at the door of a few people, maybe not knocking literally, maybe you call them up and say that you wanted to go over. So one of the familiar voices and faces to us in Pittsburgh is Sal Patitucci, who is from the same town, and also indicates how the migration of people from the same town in the area almost felt like, you could recognize the same last names and so forth. But then there is also when you knock at Lou's door.
Right.
Did you tell him that the reason of you going over and seeing him, or it was just Lou, I'm just coming to see you? Did you keep the response all the way to the end?
Well, I didn't tell him exactly why. I did tell him I was showing up with a camera, which probably scared the heck out of him,
You would put up the suit, the firefighter suit, right?
Yeah, exactly. But he was very gracious and agreed to do it, because that's what we Italian Americans do, right? We stick together and try to help each other, just like our previous generation did. But so he agreed to do it, and I told him we wouldn't take up too much time, but I didn't tell him why. I just told him I wanted to interview him about his family, and I said I was doing a documentary about immigration, and our parents' generation coming over from San Pietro to Sharpsburg, and so and then I told him, I interviewed him and got a little background about his life and his family, and then I made sure the camera was rolling, and I told him exactly why I was there, and that I wanted him to hear something, and then I played back the audio for him, and that was really I wanted that moment of surprise, on camera. It would have ruined it had I told people what exactly I was doing there, So that's what we did.
Let Lou tell us his side of the story until he gets.
Like Pete said, everything went, as he had said, and when we weren't done, but he said, I have a little recording, to see if you recognize who this is. And I had no idea. we played a recording. It was my grandparents saying hi to me. And the last time I saw them was 38 years ago. Last time I talked to them. And I'm like, whoa, you know. And and he played it again and again. And they were saying hi to me, wondering how I was doing. We did write letters, but to hear their voice 38 years later, it was them. And I just stood there and froze.
Uh-huh.
It was really neat, very nice. Because I didn't know he had that.
Yeah.
And Pete played it into my phone, and I've saved it.
And I'm sure you got teary. I got teary. I had the tissue box every so often. I would reach out for one because you just feel almost the same emotions, especially if you have gone through the process of leaving your family behind, whether it was need, choice, wherever it is, family is family. So hearing the voice of people that you can have embrace and kiss anymore, it just is probably one of the most physical, emotion that you can still.
For sure.
So.
And then after for 2-3 weeks, I carried that feeling with me. And I was calling my sisters who live in different states and different relatives. And I said, you're not going to believe. All my cousins, you're not going to believe whose voice I heard. And then I would play it on my phone to them.
And then probably you would get a similar reaction. Pete, obviously, it's obvious that needs to be recognized that this material is so special because, again, it documents the everyday people from a different era. It is so fascinating. And it is also the true people, so to speak. There was not necessarily posing in front of a camera and so forth. And some of them, it's interesting how maybe they don't know how to speak into this piece of technology. They feel that it's almost like the telephone, that this piece of technology is going to talk back. So, or some other messages of people that was their last chance before, unfortunately, they left us. This material could be used in many exhibits on immigration. It's an invaluable treasure. Is anything in the works or ideas or talks that you might be sharing, or maybe so that material can keep on being enjoyed by everyone?
Right. No, I haven't really entered that phase yet. I agree that they are very valuable to us all and to the country as a source of understanding of what immigrants went through, whether it's Italians or any other nationality. But no, haven't. I would like to discuss maybe with some museum or institution about donating them, and getting them professionally transferred and all that, translated. And figure something out there, because they do need to live on. I just haven't figured it out.
Maybe, yeah. And maybe it's also, after this project, maybe you want to hold on to them a little longer.
Yeah,
you might not be there yet yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm still just, we're still just, riding this wave with the film and doing screenings and, and things like that. And then we'll definitely hold on to them and worry about that later. I had some people did a screening at a film festival, and I got that exact same question, which really got me thinking, like, yeah, you know what? Because there's so much that wasn't even in the film. I mean, there were hours and hours of this stuff, and I counted 106 voices that were recorded, some family members and some just people from, not just San Pietro, but all around, Piano, a little town next door, Cosenza, so, it really is kind of dots the map around the whole Calabria area.
So talking about film screening, obviously I have to extend to you the invitation to possibly consider doing a screening at Istituto Mondo Italiano in Pittsburgh. We would love to have you and Lou, obviously, and anyone else that is, Sharpsburg is so close to us. We're probably just a 20-minute drive. We just crossed the one bridge.
Okay.
And but we'll talk about that later. But for those that are interested in seeing the documentary again, is it still in some sort of festival mode, or just through screening? What can you tell us?
We continue to do screenings. I actually have a screening in New York, in Manhattan at the Calabria Institute. So that's come up in May, and then we'll have a little discussion after that. Looking at possibly doing some more. Yeah, it's in some film festivals, so we're still making that, doing that tour, but it is available. I have it available on DVD.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, you can go to the website, Messaggero documentary.com. You can get it on DVD. There's also a link, you can watch it, rent it on Vimeo on demand. You can rent it for $3.99. So there's those options. And of course, I can't forget, it aired on PBS in Pittsburgh back in October on the first day of Italian American Heritage Month. And actually, this is the first time I'm making this public. It's going to air again on channel 22 WPNT on Saturday, May the 29th at 11 a.m. And we will probably have a repeat a month later. Yeah, so that's going to be something that we're looking forward to. I had a lot of people ask to run it again, and it's not that easy, with programming a television station. They have to, they have so much programming they have to get on. So this is an opportunity where I was able to work with my contacts again in the industry, and I'm getting some sponsors lined up now, and we're gonna show it again, because a lot of people, especially the older generation, doesn't quite understand streaming, or even a DVD is may not understand how to get it. So, but everybody knows, local TV still, so you can turn it on and watch it then.
Absolutely. Lou, if I may ask you, do you have children?
No, I don't. No
Okay,
children.
so in your being Italian American, are certain things that bring you back to some of the traditions that you had and share with your family that you were able to maintain in Sharpsburg?
My parents are both gone. Their brothers and sisters who were here, they're also gone.
Okay.
I have a few cousins left here. That is all.
Okay, so it's all on you, Lou. It's all on you.
Yes.
Well, this has been a very nice conversation. Unfortunately, our time together is up, but with the promise of next time is going to be in person. Okay, we will follow up on that idea. So il Big Bang ha detto stop. It's time for us to say arrivederci e alla prossima. We want to thank you for tuning in into the program. If you have any questions or comments, or if you have any topics you would like us to address, please contact us at theitalianradiohour@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And remember, if you or your family and friends have missed a prior episode, or would like to listen to this episode again, you can visit our website at www.istitutomondoitaliano.org and click on the Italian Radio Hour tab. Or also you can subscribe to the Italian Radio Hour YouTube channel, or listen to the episode wherever you catch your favorite podcasts. I would like to thank our guests, Pietro Ferraro and Lupo Stanzo, our sponsor Istituto Mondo Italiano, La Prima Espresso e Alla Boara for the music. Until next time, alla prossima. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao.